3 of being a vegetarian. Oh, got it. All right. And so I'm on week 3 of being a vegetarian after watching that documentary, because it just scared the crap out of me. These are the books I'm reading right now: Braiding Sweetgrass, The Future of Smart, and Grading for Equity. And then I'm listening to the Next Level Living podcast and Chris Emden's Ratchetdemic. And what I'm eating is Daily Fresh. It's basically, they pack it straight from the farm, these like fruits and vegetable like bowls and smoothies and things. If you're thinking about doing it, please let me send you my recommendation code, because we'll both get $35 off of a box. So let me know if you're into that at all. So that's what's up. I just want to throw out some disclaimers. Oh, yay. Oh, I'm looking at the screen. Okay. All right. People watching stuff. Okay, good stuff. As I mentioned before, I've been caregiving for my mom. So she started hospice a few weeks ago. So it's been a very challenging journey. I'm in a good space right now with it. So that's why I can be here with you. But those of you who know what I like to bring when I do have time and space to bring everything will know why I'm saying that, just because I feel like my slides aren't exactly how I would love my slides to be. But so thank you for your grace around that. And I don't have my second monitor, which I usually have. But we're going to get into it. I was so excited when John asked me, and I had so many different, slides to pull from different keynotes. And so it's kind of a hodgepodge, but I promise you there'll be some takeaways for you, hopefully, in this session. And thank you for sending love and prayers. So first, a quick test, John. When my chat box right now is open and being able to see your faces, is it causing a gray box for you all on your screen? No? Okay, I see Sarah saying no. Beautiful.
We're seeing perfect share screen, looking great.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so I'm going to start with this first question. How have you as a leader cultivated conditions for deeper learning? For me, it was primarily in the classroom is how I got the sense of how to cultivate conditions for deeper learning, but I'd rather this not be just me talking. So as I give you an overview or kind of storytelling of projects, what I'm hoping you can do on the side is start to just identify the conditions that made these projects possible, right? Because what we're going to do is co-generate our own list. I'm not going to tell you, oh, these are all the conditions, right? You're going to be able to see for yourself what it probably took for these projects to happen. And what's going to be nice is when we do a waterfall chat, and then John can save this chat, we're going to have this badass list of conditions for deeper learning that was generated by you beautiful humans, right? So the first project I'll talk about is a project that I did with an 11th grade group. And the whole point, I taught humanities, which was US history and American literature in this context. And I really wanted to do work with the International Rescue Committee. They had a peacemakers program where high school age refugees were able to practice their English, process their pain and their storytelling and all of that in a space together. And so I wanted my high school students to meet with these peacemaker students to engage in some work together. And so it culminated in this Empathy in Action Arts and Poetry Festival. And again, you're going to start to think about, well, what conditions made this possible, right? So I'll just give you a hint, right? Outside partnerships, leveraging partnerships with the community, right? That's a condition that made this deeper learning experience possible. Okay, I won't give you any more hints. You'll see my name was different. I was married, then I got liberated. Now I'm Michelle Pledger. Anyway, moving on. So for this, we knew we wanted this to be something like just more than at the school. So I reached out to the gallery owner of this studio in Little Italy, San Diego, and just told him about the project. He was all on board. His parents were immigrants. So he said, you know what, I want you to use my gallery for free. He cleared the date. It was a beautiful experience. And this is an interdisciplinary project with Shawnee Leader, who was the art teacher at the time. And so what happened was all these 11th grade students, they did everything from start to finish. So they curated the space, and we got into the gallery. It was completely empty, blank canvas. And so, it was all up to them to decide, how do we want to curate this art? They had already taken photographs of their peacemaker. We used the term refugee at that time. Now I use the term newcomer or or New American, some people use. Anyway, they had taken photographs of them and then they painted their portraits. And then they also interviewed them about their experience, why they had to leave their home country, how they were received when they came to the US, how they were treated in school, moments of optimism and hope in their life. And so students also painted more abstract pieces that were based off of these optimistic interviews. And so they curated the space. Students also read a ton of memoirs that were based on the lives of refugees. And so they had space at the gallery where they talked about their learnings from that book. Students created a band to perform while people were mingling and looking at all of the art. And then my students shared spoken word poetry that was based on the lives of these students. And then the peacemakers, they gave testimonies, short testimonies about their life and their experience. So by the end of the night, like, there was not a dry eye in the room. Like, people were really impacted by it. And what was great is that all this art was on auction. It was a silent auction. So anybody who came could contribute. And then all of the proceeds went back to the Peacemakers program, which did college scholarships for these students. I'll go ahead and pause because I want to give you a chance to think about what conditions like made that possible, what had to be possible for some of these things to happen. So I'll give you a chance to jot some of those things down. We're not putting them in the chat just yet. And I think for me, what was a really powerful moment was just seeing at the end of the night, sometimes the family members of my students would purchase the art piece, but then gift it to the Peacemaker student so they could take it home to show their families. And I'm never one of those people who feels like, oh, you should only talk about the great things. Some things I wish I would have done differently with this project is I wish I would have thought about location a bit more, because it was so far away from where some of the Peacemakers family members lived, so that they couldn't actually attend. It was like a hardship. So I wish I would have thought through how to transport those families so they could have experienced this in the same way that the High North County families did. So that's like one of the things I wish I would have done differently. But in terms of the impact on students, I would love for someone who feels comfortable reading aloud in front of a screen that you can kind of not see the words clearly. Any volunteers who's up for that? Let me scroll on the screen here.
I can do it, Michelle.
Thank you so much.
I feel like refugees are a group of people largely ignored by the bulk of citizens. In the United States, everything is so fast moving and people rarely stop and get to know the people surrounding them. Before this project, I really wasn't aware that there are refugees living in San Diego. I always assumed that San Diego was full of middle-class people, not refugees from war-torn countries. This project has definitely given me a better sense of the type of people who live right here in San Diego. It also gave me an idea about what some of these refugees had to go through before arriving in the United States. I took away a much broader understanding of the lives of refugees.
And there's a little bit more, Summer, sorry.
Okay. During the exhibition, I told my dad that I really wanted to purchase one of the paintings of the refugee I interviewed, Mayo, and give it to him as a gift. Although it wasn't my painting, I really wanted to feel that warm, fuzzy feeling when you give a gift to someone. I've given tons of gifts in my life, but none felt as good as giving the painting to Mayo. He was so happy to get something that truly connected to him. He said something like, "I've never had anything like this for myself before." This truly put into perspective the impact someone can have on a refugee's life, or anyone's life for that matter. I really learned a true sense of what it means to give, and I think that it is more valuable than any factual knowledge out there.
Thank you so much, Summer, for reading that. So what's interesting about this particular student who wrote this reflection this year, and I'm probably going to start crying because that's where my emotions are at right now, but this year was his first year teaching in his own classroom. So he is now a second grade teacher at one of our elementary schools. And it's just beautiful to just see how his empathy developed throughout that project, and now to see him kind of giving that back in his own like beautiful and brilliant way. So now we're going to take a moment to go ahead and fantastic reading voice. We're going to do a waterfall chat. So start to queue up here. So my question is, what conditions made this particular project possible, right? So get it ready, get it queued up, about 20 seconds. And on 3, 2, 1, we're going to just drop it. We're going to waterfall chat the crap out of this. Okay, ready? 3, 2, 1. All right, I see planning time, off-campus space, cross-content partner, inspirational text, authenticity, student courageous dialogue and reflection, radical collaboration, self-identity work, relational agency, authenticity, community partners, authenticity, off-campus space, ownership, right? So these are, we're going to keep this list going because we're going to do 2 brief projects, but thank you so much, right? So you're already identifying when you're as a teacher leader or a school leader, how you could be designing and creating or opening up space for teachers and students to experience learning in this way. Okay, so another one of my most memorable projects is called Tuesdays with Story. And some of you may have heard me talk about this project before, but there's a book that's called Tuesdays with Maury, where he kind of interviews a former professor and goes through this, all these different lessons. And so we did a play on that. I knew that I wanted to do an intergenerational project. And again, this was a year when I taught in North County, San Diego at a time when it was predominantly white students. I don't like to label students, but a little bit entitled, one might say. So I was constantly trying to think of ways to create and develop empathy for other people and getting them to see that not everyone lived the same life that they lived. Anyway, so Tuesdays with Story ended up being a project that the NBC News covered that I think I should be able to show you here after this ad finishes, just to give you a gist of it. The clip tells it better than I can tell it. So let's see. All right, let's try it again. Thumbs up if you can hear it.
You can see that it's muted down on the video on the actual. There you go.
You're so right. Thank you. That's why we're partners for life. Okay.
For life, exactly.
Here we go. Here we go.
Do you remember the book titled Tuesdays with Maury? In it, a journalist makes weekly visits to his former college professor to learn the meaning of life. Well, now one Southern California teacher has taken that concept to the high school classroom. As Vicky Vargas reports, the program is called Tuesdays with Story.
Have fun with that.
She uses words like empathy and critical thinking.
So this is our last day of filming.
Then Michelle Cedrina Clark lets her U.S. History and American Literature class loose.
Let's go.
Every Tuesday for a month, these students from San Marcos High-Tech High walk 1 block to the Brookdale retirement home.
Human beings are the most dynamic textbooks, and I think that students can learn so much more by having this personal connection of someone who lived through the history than simply reading about it.
It is a different kind of classroom.
How did that song go? Because I'm not familiar with songs of...
Younger than springtime, are you? And that's what we were younger.
And what they learn is that everyone has a story to tell.
When you're a foster child, you're afraid because you don't have a home.
It's evident 86-year-old Pat Livingston is connecting with Lucas and Nicholas, doling out wisdom.
Losing youth is tough.
And honesty.
I can't do the computer. I'm not a genius.
But the project goes even further. The students are sketching portraits and making memory boxes for their Brookdale buddies and taking a little artistic license.
I'm planning on doing a more colorful kind of work on his facial features just to show how youthful person he's on the inside.
He was in the Navy, so I'm going to burn the Navy seal on the top, and then there's going to be an anchor burned right here.
One of the lessons the students are learning is the lesson of time. And when they spend time on these projects, they say somehow they begin to feel closer to their buddy.
The students hope whatever time has erased will come back in some way, brighter and more colorful, when they present this artwork to their buddies in January.
I'm impressed with their interest the questions they ask.
Tom Drees believes his sessions with teenagers 70 years his junior are having an impact.
Morgan has told my stories back to me a couple of times, so I made some impression on him.
This high school junior now realizes Drees faced the same challenges when he was her age.
How teachers had helped him when he was in school and how I'm getting that help now. So that really helped me to connect with them a little more.
So I try to design projects that have a human connection with people that are outside of the student's normal comfort zone.
This time, the goal and the hope is that these generations stay connected even after the camera is turned off. In San Marcos, Vicky Vargas, NBC4 News.
All right, so let's take a moment to think about what that same question there. Let me get back to our question. What conditions made this particular project? Don't press enter yet, but go ahead and get it queued in the chat. And as you're typing that, I'll talk over it so that you can't focus. But what else was cool about this project is that by the end of it, so they created these DVDs of the person's life and they interviewed them in chapters. So their childhood, growing up years, the war years, their relationships, like some of them had been through many, many marriages. So they had these chapters of their life, and then they were able to gift the DVD back to the Brookdale resident. And it was something that their family could have, because some of those people by the next year had passed on. But now their family had this memory of, or not a memory, they had an actual tangible gift to just go back and like hear their loved one talking about their life. And they always say like a sign of a good project is if it's not there anymore, either because the students loved it so much they kept it, or because it's having an impact somewhere in the world, right? It's not just a project that you throw away. Okay, hopefully that bought some time for people to type up some conditions. So on 3, 2, 1, we're going to drop in the chat. 3, 2, 1. All right, let's see what we got going on here. All right, safe space, share and show, embracing culture and diversity. Basically, Michelle's famous and she didn't empathy, time for human connections. Community connections, a lot of getting people out of their comfort zone, cultivating joy, proximity, using experiences, text, a lot around authenticity, time, materials, choice, community connections, co-generative, authentic audience, right? So a lot about time. So great, already just adding more to our list of these conditions for deeper learning. Okay, so the last one I'll tell you about was my last year teaching in a K-12 classroom. And this was a 9th grade group. And after this, I moved to the GSE, but it was just after the 2016 elections. And there was just a lot of negative rhetoric about Latinx people in general and Mexican Americans in particular. And I think I shared this with the Hopewell people, but you get to hear it again. And there was we just felt that tension as teachers, and our students felt it. I had more Latinx students in this particular year. And so we wanted to do something that presented counter narratives that really celebrated the contributions of the Latinx community in this country and other parts of the world. So we started by taking students to Chicano Park, which has the world's largest collection of Chicano murals, and they got to hear from guest speakers who were on the original steering committee of creating Chicano Park. So that was kind of the launch of the project, just getting students excited and interested. We took them to the border and they did reflective writing at the border where, they saw the 2 fences dividing 2 countries, and then they shared out those reflections at Borderfield State Park. It's also called Friendship Park. And while we were there, we had U.S. Customs and Border Protection folks speaking and sharing their perspective of how they want to keep the country safe. And then we had the founder of Border Angels there speaking about his role in trying to keep humans alive. And it was really important for students to see that you could have people who have different perspectives, they disagree on approaches, right? But they could be in community and in dialogue with each other. So it wasn't about me, telling students, well, you should think this way or that way. It's like, okay, hear these perspectives, and then come to your own conclusions around this work. We're reading the book, The Distance Between Us. So this was 9th grade, and we watched a documentary called Which Way Home, which follows the journey of unaccompanied minors who are traveling from Central America to the US. And then each student selected a Latin American country that they were going to be the experts of, like that they had to know everything about the people, the economics, the arts, the culture. They were going to become an expert in that particular country. And this was all gearing up towards a Corazón y Alma, which means heart and soul, performing arts and science festival. You'll see a lot of my projects have like performing or something. I love, I want to have fun too while I'm doing it. So we did this, and this was an interdisciplinary project between Spanish and the math physics teacher. So the students self-selected into what I would call like kind of production teams. So there was the public relations group. So that group, aside from being the experts in their own country, they were in charge of securing the venue, doing all the layout for the space, doing all the promotion. They designed the t-shirts. So every student had a shirt that said, I'm an expert in US-Cuban relations, or I'm an expert in US-Honduran relations, or whatever their country was. So that way, the community members and parents and caregivers that came to the exhibition would know what to ask them questions about. And this was, again, completely student driven. One of the students was like, we really want a radio station to be there. And I was like, great, awesome. How are you going to do that? Like, who are you going to call? And she worked really hard, and she got 90.3, which if you live in San Diego, it's one of like probably the top 3 sort of pop radio stations in the region. And they came and they broadcasted from the exhibition. All of the students in their math physics class were working on instruments that were inspired by Latin American instruments. And they worked with an Argentinian scientist who his focus is on like how music and sound waves like impact the brain. So they all worked and then shared and played their instruments at the exhibition. The music group worked with the Spanish teacher, and they all learned songs in Spanish and performed them, whether they knew how to sing or not, which was very entertaining. When somebody like has the heart of a singer, but have like the vocal cords of like a horse parrot or something, that's kind of like what was happening. But it was all love. And then the poetry group, they worked together on bilingual poems that they did in tandem. So there were these tandem spoken words, but they were bilingual. And it was just so awesome to see that status level shift, as my native Spanish speakers were the experts in this space. And just because they were teaching the other students how to pronounce things correctly and what words meant. And we'll watch actually, John, how much time do I have? I'm sorry, I'm not taking.
No apologies necessary. The layout is speak till 55 and then 15 minutes of questions until 5:10. So you've got 12 minutes.
Okay, I'll just keep going then. And then there was the theater group, and they, the students who opted into this group, it just interviewed each other about just different stories. They story shared about things in their life, and they were like, okay, they selected 2 stories that they wanted to do vignettes, like a short play around. And one of them was on one of the students and her mother's journey coming across the border. And so that's what one vignette was about. And then another student wanted to really feature what it was like when she came to this country and didn't know English very well, but then she worked really hard and eventually won the 3rd grade spelling bee. So they did this whole vignette around that. And what was beautiful about this, again, all of it was student generated, and then they performed. And then probably my favorite group, because I'm a dancer, was the group that just worked really hard to learn. They taught themselves Argentine tango and Dominican bachata and Cuban salsa, and just seeing them rehearse. There were some matches made during this, projects and deeper learning can lead to relationships that last a lifetime. And it actually led to one of the students, transitioning from male to female. So it's just like there's so much that can happen when we allow for deeper learning to flourish. And so they performed, and then the final group did the art. They basically tried to think about everything we did during the project and try to capture it in their own mural. And they did this whole unveiling at the exhibition and then talk through why they put certain elements into their art piece. And it was transformational for my Latinx students. And I say I don't mean I own them, but I call my kids my babies. So because of what was shared during this project, one of my students' father was deported, and I've written a poem about that experience. But she wanted to then talk to the whole team about why this was just more than a project for her, and how having like someone who's the sole breadwinner from your family suddenly be ripped away from the family after living in the US for 19 years. And she talked about the impact that had on their family, because she just wanted students to really take learning this project more seriously. And then, but it also had an impact on my white students as well. So I'm gonna call in Sarah. Would you be willing to read this piece?
During the Corazón y Alma project, I discovered my love for different cultures and my voice. Each new lesson taught was not just a lecture or activity, it was an experience. These experiences came through classroom activities, group work, and interactions with the community, allowing me to personally connect to my learning. The Corazón y Alma project taught me how to voice my ideas, present publicly, and be confident. You could say that through the Corazón y Alma project, I found my own heart and soul.
Thank you so much. All right, so this time we don't have to do waterfall. We're gonna do a raindrop chat. So just our last question here, what conditions made this particular project possible? And I know some of those are going to be repetitive, and that's kind of the point. If you're like, oh, some of them are the same as last time. There might be some new conditions. So go ahead and drop them in the chat as you think about this one. Can interdisciplinary. Students as experts, product choice, yes. Collaboration, authenticity again, current event connections, right? Like responding to what's going on in the actual world, choice, differentiation, self-selecting, empathy, safe space outside of classrooms, hearts, hands, and minds connection, right? Choice and voice. So, I mean, y'all know, you probably innately know, you knew before I did this, we know because the similar things that get us jazzed and like into this deeper learning space they work for students, right? None of us want to just sit and get all the time, even though that's what I feel like I'm doing to you right now. But hopefully you're getting something from this. Can I get some like thumbs up or heads nods or something if this is landing with anyone? Okay, all right, I see a couple. All right, beautiful. Okay, so I'll wrap up here with just how have you seen conditions for deeper learning cultivated in a school setting? So you touched on a lot of this already. After I left the classroom, I co-directed something called the Deeper Learning Hub and the Share Your Learning campaign. So the Deeper Learning Hub, it's a national practitioner, global practitioner hub to get people to do more deeper learning across this country and other countries. And so I co-directed that with Mari Jones for 3 years. And that's what our whole goal was, to just spread deeper learning practices across the world. And what I've noticed in all of the places where we see it thriving is, of course, there's an element of choice on the part of the teacher, but also on the part of the students. There is an element of chance in terms of like risk taking, like some of those things I didn't know about. So I had to be willing to learn with students, right? And that takes a lot of humility to say like, I don't know, but let's figure this out together, right? Let's go on this journey together. So just taking a chance on partnerships, taking a chance on what students are capable of doing. And then there's always an element of challenge, right? We don't want to just do things that are really easy for us to do, but how is this challenging me as an educator? How is this challenging students, right? And then lastly, one that's really important to me is like, how does it result in some sort of change? And I mean that personal change for the student, but also change in the community, right? So those are the types of deeper learning experiences that I was hungry for, but also could see in other spaces. And for those of you who are like, well, I want a recipe. Well, I thought about how you can make a recipe for it. Thank you, Mary, for smiling. I think when I think about conditions for deeper learning, I think there's a lot of reflection that takes place. And I don't mean like at the end of a project, I mean throughout, like how is the teacher reflective? How are students reflective? How are families reflective? Of course, I view it as something that's equitable, like all students getting what they need and deserve to be successful academically, socially, emotionally, all of those things. It's collaborative, right? We're working together. It's co-constructed with students, or it's interdisciplinary with other teachers or with the community. It's iterative, right? We're constantly getting better. So there are moments where we have drafts and revision and all those beautiful things. And it's personal. And then of course there's an element of exhibition or some sort of showcasing that happens. And is the Q&A, I have 10 minutes for Q&A, right?
You have 15 minutes for the Q&A. We have 15 minutes for the Q&A.
We have 15 minutes for Q&A. That starts right now or when?
No, we need to be done. We're going to be done at 10 after. So you actually have 5 more minutes, Michelle.
Oh my gosh, we are doing golden, beautiful humans. Okay.
Are.
So I'll close with this. So because this is more related to exhibition, and then we'll do some resource exploration with the share.
Hey, Michelle. Oh, thank you so much, Kana. Kana already had it there, but Rashima had asked if you could go back to the slide, but we got it in there. We're set.
Oh, okay. Yes. And I will send you all a PDF of the slides as well, everyone. Okay. So with the Share Learning campaign, our goal was to get 5 million students to publicly share their learning to an audience beyond the classroom. We were trying to do it by 2020. We were almost there and the pandemic happened. So we didn't get to the 5 million until a little bit after 2020, but we did get there. And the belief was that, or our theory of change was that when students share their learning with an authentic audience, we provide them with an opportunity to share their story, reflect on their growth, and imagine other possibilities for their future. And so some of you have probably seen this before, but Ron Berger talks about the hierarchy of audience and where like engagement and motivation, and I would actually add quality of work. As you move up the hierarchy of audience, you have increased motivation, engagement, and quality of work, right? If students are just doing something to fulfill a requirement to the teacher, then it's the lowest level of engagement and motivation. But when we can get to a place where students are actually doing something that's in service of the world in some capacity, that's when we're going to get that high motivation, engagement. And that's when the quality of work also improves because students care a lot about what they're doing. And when students have this opportunity to share their learning, they feel known, they feel supported, they feel like they can contribute and that their work has value. And even as adults, we want to feel all those things. We want to be known, we want to be supported, we want to feel like we have value and something to offer and contribute to the world. And so we would ask educators to commit to giving their students this opportunity, because even if you weren't at a project-based learning school, right? Because I realize not everybody is in that space. We were saying like, look, at the end of the day, your students are learning something. So if we can at least get teachers to do exhibitions, student-led conferences, or presentations of learning as assessment, that's going to force them to do some serious reflection about the type of learning that's taking place in the classroom, right? Because you can't showcase a worksheet, right? Or if you do, it's not going to be that exciting. So even if you're not at like a project-based learning or problem-based or, whatever place-based learning school, it doesn't matter. At the end of unit or any type of learning, we can give students that opportunity to exhibit their work and go deeper. So I was going to have you go in the chat. I think we have a couple minutes to do that, to shareyourlearning.org. I just want to show you where a ton more resources are. Like we don't need to reinvent the wheel on so many of this because Mari and I made the wheel for you. But if you go to shareyourlearning.org, I'll put it in the chat and then I'll also navigate there myself. You'll see a resources page that just has a ton more, because it's not just about being like inspired and innovative. Sometimes you actually need practical tools. So you'll see actual toolkits for student-led conferences, presentations of learning, and exhibitions. But you also can go to the resource page, and some of the resources we created ourselves, but a lot of them we gathered from just our community partners. So you'll see things from EL education, from big picture learning. We did SLC prep for Spanish, Vietnamese, and Chinese students, right? So in case you're at a space where you have a newcomer population. So there's so many just beautiful resources that can help with the creating conditions for deeper learning that I wanted to make sure you had access to. Okay. Oh my goodness. Thank you for listening. I'm gonna stop talking forever. And let's just hear from y'all, like what's resonating, what questions.
Hey, Michelle, would it be okay if in between, well, first off, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm always amazed. Would it be okay if while we give them about a minute or two to kind of think on some questions, you post maybe the PDF link, and just so that we kind of had it in the chat and in this recorded video?
Yes. Yes, I can do that.
That would be lovely.
Okay.
And while Dr. Pleasure's doing that, y'all can reflect on what you heard, think about what you might want to ask. And when Dr. Pleasure's ready, we'll ask some questions.
Does that work? Okay, go ahead.
Sorry. Is it too early to ask a question?
No, it's not too early. It's never too early. And just Oscar, before you start, I'm someone who requires so much think time, and I know we don't have it. So I might answer one way and then follow up with an email when I think of something better to say tomorrow.
I'm curious because I loved that last project that you shared where like kids self-selected into like a poetry, dance, music, theater. Like, how do you manage the iterative process with that many disciplines to consider? Because I've been thinking like I want to go big like that, but I always end up playing it safe, not taking a chance, and like just being like, we're all doing either poetry or music and then done, right? Like how did you manage something so beautiful and big?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for that project, with each of those production teams, there was one team lead. And so instead of me checking with like 50 to 60 students, I would just check in with those team leads. And so they would create their own backwards design with my support, right? Of like, okay, our exhibition is this date. For the theater group, what does that mean? Like, what are you trying to have done by this week? Okay, for the poetry group. So even though what they're doing by those milestone dates is different, like the dance group's choreography or this, they still had those checkpoints, right? That we all had to adhere to, but they were just different content wise. So that allowed me to only check in with those leads. And if I needed to intervene, or if someone wasn't, pulling their weight, like often happens, then you could go talk to the whole team. But so when it was productive work time, then I'm just going to each group. I'm looking at progress. Okay, so this vignette, this person still hasn't learned their lines. Okay, so I need to talk to that person. All right, the choreography over here, you know what I mean? So, but setting up that just made it easier, because then I just had 6 people that I had to interface with on a regular basis versus like everyone. So that was helpful. And then the same way we backwards design for our own projects, like they're just doing it for their own team.
That's what I was going to say. Like, you basically had them design their own projects.
Like their own timelines, all of that. And then there were things we did as a class, like we were reading the book as a class and having those discussions and reflecting on the documentary. So there were still these class components, but when it was productive work time, it was all on them.
Productive work time. I'm gonna steal that. Thank you.
Other questions?
Hey, Michelle.
Hi, Summer.
First, thanks so much for just being here with us tonight, in spite of all the things that you're dealing with your mom. Again, prayers lifted up. Thanks for sharing your love with us, though, at the same time as you're navigating that. my question is, you do such brilliant work around identity that takes a lot of courageous conversation when students start unpacking and processing things that maybe they haven't known about themselves or uncovered. What intentional ways do you design that, around like some of the emotional work, the labor, the healing spaces, so that they can thrive and process those things in a healthy way? But also on the other side, how do we create capacity for teachers to feel comfortable facilitating those types of spaces? Because in the past, we've gotten feedback from teachers saying, I don't really necessarily feel as comfortable because, as you know, we have to do our own self-work. So I guess it's twofold. Like, how do you help navigate students through that emotional laborious work when it comes to identity projects? And then also, what are some intentional ways that we can help build capacity amongst like the leaders and the teachers?
Yeah, those are both great questions. With the student one, I hate to say it, I did not do that well for most of my years as a K-12 teacher because I didn't learn how to do it well until it was a little bit too late. But even now, though, with my adult students and the courses that I teach, they need that same type of like care and love when you bring up heavy stuff. I'm learning. And so what I've learned to do now is create space at the end. And I'm still trying to get better at this. So if, let's say something's so heavy and students need to dispel energy, then I try to do something at the end of the class that does that. If it's something where people need to gather energy to like recenter, because it was like wild and crazy, and we need to come back in, then trying to do like breathing or meditate. So depending on what the thing is, trying to figure out how to meet the moment. But then also what I recently did with the course was, and even in our course, our Thursday night course, the caring for the core, the more we can infuse those practices of caring for the core, then people can start to self-source their own healing until they can get to like a therapist or mindfulness coach or home, or to their cat that's going to aggressively cuddle them or whatever it is, right? So that's something I wish I would have done better in K-12 that I'm now doing better in adult learning. But in K-12, I think kids they're never too young to learn how to self-source some of their own like love and healing, because it's no guarantee they're going to get it from anywhere else, right? For any of us. And then the second question about teachers, we cannot, you hear me say this all the time, we can't give what we don't have. And so there are many teachers who feel ill-equipped to have these conversations, not only with students, but sometimes if parents or caregivers are critiquing them, and it's because they haven't had the practice, which that's why I think it's leadership's responsibility to start engaging their faculty in the self-work and conversations, because the more we're doing it as adults, then it becomes easier to facilitate with students. But we can't facilitate things we've never like went through or experienced or gotten better at ourselves in anything, whether it's this or even you think about any subject matter. You're not going to be, I can't teach bio the way John can because I don't have that experience, that knowledge, that practice, right?
You probably could.
So that's the same for like any of the self-work. Like we need to engage in it. Hopefully it's with our colleagues, but sometimes it might have to be in other affinity spaces outside of work.
This is another quick question. My resources is based around using experience as text, and not just student experience, but just any experience as text. If I send you my resource, would you kindly look at it and give me some critique?
I would love to look at your resource, Oscar.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate you.
Hey, Michelle, I have a quick question. Oftentimes what we hear from members of the cohort, it's kind of these questions around getting people on board, and so it's like within our classroom, within our own designs, within our practice, there's all sorts of ownership and all sorts of control that we have. And then it's like trying to start these things that you so clearly have kind of started at different schools. I've worked with you and thought the things that you were doing were you were really pushing what felt like was normal for me. How do you kind of get people on board, whether that's through, partnerships, or what has that felt like or been like or looked like for you?
Getting like teachers on board.
What's interesting is like, I'd love to hear all, I think teachers on board, parents on board, students on board. What has that felt like for you?
Yeah, with the teacher leadership, especially when we were starting to do equity work, it was just so much about having them experience it. Because there's no way we could make it go into classrooms if like to Summer's question, like experiencing as adults. So I asked the director at the time, can I lead some workshops around this? And then I asked to lead more. And that really helped, because once people experience what it's like to like be authentic and be human, it's uncomfortable for some people at first. And some people are like, wait, why are we talking about this? This is work that, my personal life is not. But that's like systemic oppression and like white supremacy culture and all those things that are telling us that you have to be separate. You have to separate your emotions from, your work, and you can't come and be a full human. So once people start to experience what it's like to be free, or like more free, because we're not ever totally free, I don't think, but more free, then in most cases, I won't say all, then they're hungry for it. And you can start to, you only need, what Paul Gorski says, 15% of people to be on board for transformation to happen. So you just need that critical mass. In terms of caregivers, because I taught in North County, which as a Black female teacher in North County, it was really challenging. I don't know what it would be like during these times, but it was very challenging because you just get so much pushback, even with the Latinx project that I thought was just like celebrating cultural, but there was definitely parent and caregiver pushback. And so what I would always try to do is at the open house, when you have that back to school night and people come, I'm just really, really clear about my approach, about critical thinking and what that looks like in my classroom. And I would send updates every 2 weeks that laid out exactly what we're reading and why we're reading it. And what, just to me, the more information that you could give would help for some people settle. And sometimes the more information, it takes them. But anyway, for most people, it helps like settle, because you're giving a clear, if you can articulate why you're doing what you're doing and how you're not indoctrinating kids and all that stuff, the more helpful it is. And I had to like overdo that, because just them seeing me as a young, well, I'm not young now, but I was young, a young Black female, they've already made assumptions about who I am, what I'm going to be telling their kids. And sometimes their assumptions were wrong, because I'm also like, I grew up like super Christian. So like sometimes I think they were just assuming that were going to happen, just weren't going to happen, but they're operating under their implicit bias, right? And I know that coming in, so I'm constantly trying to disarm whatever they're going to come at me with. And it's still, you're going to have like that happen, especially if you're trying to do like social justice or progressive work. You have to get comfortable with the pushback. And if you're all when you are all school leaders, what I wish I had more of was admin support in a really like clear way. I'm not saying my admin like supported me privately, like, oh, keep up the good work. Or not even that really. They didn't fire me. I guess that was the most support that I got. But it would have been totally different if I felt like they had my back. Like it was clear that they had sent things out to parents saying like, no, she's not about that. She's about this. And this is a school of choice. And if you don't want to be here, then take your kids out. Like I would have liked that kind of like ride or die support. And I don't feel like I had that really with any of the directors that I had. And that's what made the work so much more difficult. I just had a white colleague text me last week saying, because now she's doing social justice work for the first time, getting all of this parent and caregiver pushback. And she just said, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. And she's like, and I know it was worse for you because you were a Black female trying to do this work. But she's like, I had no idea that this is the kind of thing that you went through. And it's like, people don't empathize until like it's happening to them. And they're like, oh, this is what it feels like to be attacked, for literally just telling the truth about history. Like it's not even like lying about history, but just presenting like facts to be attacked for that was really hard. So as you lead these schools, that's just something I really hope you can do, is like support, particularly BIPOC educators, all educators, of course, but I would say that we kind of get more pushback just because of the assumptions that people will make.
So y'all, we're heading into what we had marked as our break time between 5:10 and 5:15. I've included the link for all of us to be able to head back to Kim's Zoom link. I'm going to stay here through the break. If anybody wanted to stick around until 5:15, but the hope, the expectation, and if y'all can just on your way out, just kind of stream maybe a takeaway that you got from Dr. Pledger. And thank you so very much, Michelle, for sharing your time and yourself and all this kind of wonderful perspective with us.
Thank you so much. And John, if you could save the chat and collect those conditions that everybody co-created here, so they have a nice list of the conditions they named.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks so much. Thank you everyone for having me. I hope you have a great rest of the class. And I'll see some of you tomorrow night.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you. Bye, Kana. Bye, Amy.
Thanks, Michelle.
Bye. Thank you, Allison. Bye, Sam. Bye, Tiffany.
John, I was wondering if I could just ask you a quick question.
Yeah, sure. Let me say goodbye to Michelle really quickly, and then I'll be right there.
Okay.
All right. Bye, John. Just kidding. I didn't know if you needed to be right here or
you blow me away. I really appreciate you, Michelle. I think something I appreciate about you is the concreteness of your sharing is just like, you could have easily talked for way longer about just a sense of self, but you so clearly you handed us so many things, so many like practical tools and perspectives that we could take away that I've been with this group for now 5 weeks, and you kind of see like, these are the things they need, is just like to hear perspective, but then like, what does that mean for them? What can they take and then apply? And like, that was so very like, here you go, here's what it looks like. And then to have us kind of interact and do that kind of streaming of the conditions that we would have pulled from it, like, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I really feel like that went well, and I love you. And I know you got so much going on. And so thank you for sharing that time with us, Michelle.
Great. I love you too, partner. All right, Tiffany, take care. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. Hey, Tiffany.
So I just wanted to talk to you about I finally,